Hello, this is Eric. Today is February 12th, 2023, and in this video, we will be addressing the period known as the Republic of Sword in the history of Brazil. Right, so we gotta go back to our previous class to understand how it all started, okay? And in our last class, we addressed the second reign, the reign of Dom Pedro II, which was the last phase of monarchy in Brazil. And we must understand what contributed, to the proclamation of the Republic. What were the factors that influenced people, to really consider that the best solution for Brazil was the Republic and not the monarchy anymore. So the first reason we must mention is the abolishment of slavery in Brazil. Okay, well, it was clear that England and other European industrialized countries were putting a lot of pressure on Brazil, for the end of slavery. Not because they were the good guys, but because they saw the African slaves as potential consumers for their industrialized products. Okay, so the landowners really knew that it was a matter of time for the slavery to be abolished in the country. However, they expected to be compensated. They expected they would be receiving from the government, from Dom Pedro II, an indemnity. It's really funny, but they did expect that, right? And well, that didn't happen. So the landowners, the big landowners, stopped supporting Dom Pedro II and the monarchy. The other reason for the end of monarchy in Brazil and the onset of the republic in the nation was the Paraguayan War. Well, after the end of the Paraguayan War, the army left it victorious, and they demanded more political participation in Brazil. However, if not entirely, in a monarchy, a good portion of the power is in the hands of the emperor, right? And that was incompatible with the army, the military's expectations, political expectations, okay? So that's another thing. And third, we have the fact that basically we had Count Du, right, which was a relative of Dom Pedro II, and what would be like the prime minister at the time, Viscount of Ouro Preto. The two of them really didn't appear to appreciate the army and the military. And because of that, the army was really tired of these two, right? So the inevitable happened. On November 15th, 1889, we had the military coup and the proclamation of the Republic in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, right? And I'm going to describe in a very brief manner how it all happened, right? Well, basically, what we had was the fact that Marshal Deodoro da Fonseca, who was a monarchist, right, he was seen as one of the best persons, to proclaim the republic due to his prestige among the military. However, since he was a monarchist, the revolutionaries kind of had to convince him, quote unquote, convince him, to lead all this movement. And basically, they did that in two different manners, right? First, they convinced, they spread the news that Marshal Deodoro would be arrested by the imperial government, right? This is one of the tools that the revolutionaries used to convince him to act fast, right? And secondly, we had the fact that, Marshal Deodoro da Fonseca, he had there was this guy. What was his name? I'm trying to remember his name. Oh yes, there was this guy Gaspar Silveira Martins, which happened to be one of the political rivals of Marshal Deodoro, and they spread the news that he was going to have a very important role in the continuation of the monarchy in Brazil. So since Marshal Deodoro really hated this guy, and because they were everyone was saying that Deodoro da Fonseca was going to be arrested, so he decided to act. He was convinced by the revolutionaries, right? So basically, what happened is that on November 15, they went to Marshal Deodoro's home, and after convincing him, to go there, they offered a horse to Deodoro. Deodoro da Fonseca rode this horse, right? And according to testimonies, in a certain moment in Rio de Janeiro, right, near Rua Direita, at 1st of March, or Primeiro de Março in Portuguese, right, he took off his hat and proclaimed, "Long live the Republic." And then he got off the horse, crossed the park, and returned to his home. So that was really poetic. That was really great, right? Not that much. But anyway, this is how he proclaimed the Republic. So after that, in the Imperial Palace, right, before that, the rioters, they occupied the headquarters of Rio de Janeiro, and then the Ministry of War, and they deposed the ministerial office and arrested its president. The guy was like a prime minister at the time, called Afonso Celso de Assis Figueiredo, known as Viscount of Ouro Preto, right? One of the guys that the army didn't really like. And so, they went and arrested him, right? And Viscount of Ouro Preto reminded Floriano Peixoto, right? General Floriano Peixoto, who was there, assuming all responsibility for his arresting. And, Floriano Peixoto was reminded by Ouro Preto that Floriano Peixoto had faced a war with more numerous troops in the Paraguayan War. So there was no reason for him to accept that. But soon he realized that Floriano Peixoto, the general, would not accept any orders given by Viscount of Ouro Preto, right? And then he gave a prison voice to this head of government, which was Viscount of Ouro Preto, right? And we had the news, here, "Long live the Republic," November 15th, 1889. This is Diário Popular, one of the most popular newspaper at the time. And so they announced the proclamation of Republic. Well, Dom Pedro II, you might be wondering, where is the guy, right? So he wasn't in Petrópolis. And maybe this is one of the reasons why, the revolutionaries rushed, to make the proclamation take place, because he was not there. So it was a perfect opportunity. So Dom Pedro II, as soon as he heard about the proclamation, rushed from Petrópolis to Rio de Janeiro. And he thought of ways, to stop that, and he came up with the idea of maybe telling them that he was going to change the ministerial cabinet after all the military hated Viscount of Ouro Preto, right? But that was not really enough. He realized that, and on the 16th of November, Dom Pedro II decided not to offer any resistance. He was not willing to see, blood being shed, and he accepted to be, along with his family, exiled in Europe, right? And it took a long while for him to be allowed to return to Brazil, and also the entire royal family, right? They were only allowed to return to Brazil in the 1920s. Yeah, it took a while, right? And what was then the Republic of Sword? Why this name? Yeah, because this is the period in which Brazil was led by two military presidents, right? So we had initially a period going from 1889 to 1891, in which Brazil was ruled by a provisional government led by Deodoro da Fonseca, right? So we have here his image, okay? And so he was chosen to be the head of this provisional government, and he ended up being elected in 1891 as president, right? Initially, he didn't do much, right? But something that was really important, if we can say so, that Deodoro da Fonseca did was the promulgation of the new Constitution of 1891. And obviously, this is a picture of the Constitution at the time. And, well, the Constitution of 1891 brought sensitive changes to Brazil. So the main points were republicanism, of course, right? Republicanism was adopted as a system of government, no more monarchy. Federalism, so they were following the American, the U.S. pattern, right? So federalism was adopted as a political system. The problem is how federal this federalism would be. I mean, as we are going to see, this thirst for power concentrated in the hands of the main political figure in the country still existed. Deodoro da Fonseca showed in the beginning that he wanted power, or at least as much power as possible in his hands. And that was not compatible with the expectation that the people who supported him had. At least not all of them, right? Anyway, federalism was adopted as a political system. The system increased the degree of autonomy of states. Oh, yeah. Right, in relation to the union, allowing them to have their own police force. So the states, no more provinces, okay? Provinces is a term related to the monarchy. Now we have a federalism going on. So we have the states. And, these states would now have their own police force. They would be able to collect taxes by themselves, and all this kind of thing that was really related to federalism. But as I said, that's not all. Now we would have presidentialism, right? The president would be the highest authority of the country, and he would be chosen from direct elections to a 4-year term, right? So the church and the state would be separated. If you remember our last class, Dom Pedro II had a great influence in the church, and the church on the other, and the church in turn also influenced the politics, right? Or the politics. And really now that's not going to be the case during the Republic. So we had state and church separated. The state and the church were separated, and with this, civil records were created for births, for marriages, and even deaths. Okay? And also we had the electoral system. But take a look. Universal male suffrage was instituted, so every man should vote. Yeah. Man would have to vote, but women did not receive the right to vote at this time. And even the men, they had to be over 21 years of old. They could not be illiterate, and private soldiers and beggars could not vote either, right? So this is something very important to be said. And as I said, we still had as a legacy, this sense of lots of power being concentrated in the hands of one person, in the hands of the highest authority in the country, which in this case is no longer Dom Pedro II, but the president. And then we have the beginning of the problems, right? Deodoro da Fonseca really wanted to concentrate the power in his hands. He was really an adept of the authoritarianism, right? And he tries to strengthen his power. And as a result, since the Congress was not thinking like him, was not willing to split the power with him, or to see, better said, the Congress was not willing to see all the power in the hands of Deodoro da Fonseca. So on November 3rd, 1891, the president, Deodoro da Fonseca, closes the Congress. Immediately, the Navy uprises, right? So we have here the first Navy uprising. And the Navy uprised because, they didn't want to see a repetition of the monarchy. They wanted really first, and this is something that is going to happen, not only the army, but the Navy also demanded political participation. And above all, they would not accept, the power to be concentrated in the hands of one person instead of power being spread throughout all the states, right? Which is a federalism, in fact, right? So Deodoro da Fonseca, he suffered so much pressure, even from the USA, that he could not withstand. So he resigned as president of the Republic, right? And with the end of the government, the rebels, right, the Navy rebels, surrendered their weapons because they thought they had achieved, what they wanted, but actually not really. Because what happened, this is Vice President Floriano Peixoto, the same guy that gave a prison voice to Viscount of Ouro Preto, right? This guy was Deodoro da Fonseca, Vice President. And actually, according to the Constitution, President Floriano Peixoto could not assume as the president, right? So what should be done in this case is really, that they would call, according to the Constitution, okay, after the resignation of Deodoro da Fonseca, right, we should have new elections, right? However, this is not what happened. The São Paulo oligarchy supported Floriano Peixoto, right, and sustained him in power, and they allowed him to take over as president of Brazil. So really, the Navy didn't like that, and many other people didn't like that, especially in the South. If you remember our last class about the second reign, or not on the second reign, yes, also the last class, but when we talk about the Regency period, right, we learned that, some very important conflicts took place in the southern region of the country. So again, here, people in the South are not happy that, the São Paulo oligarchy is ruling the roost again. So they decide, to take their weapons and fight. So we had these two conflicts going on, Federalist Revolution in the south of the country, and also the Navy again is really dissatisfied with Floriano Peixoto being maintained in power, right? So again, they are going to rebel. They are going to uprise. And it's basically more of the same going on. Why more of the same? So we have, two groups fighting in Rio Grande do Sul. Just for you to understand, this conflict better, we had these two groups fighting. First, the Federalists, Chimangos, right? And the Republicans, Maragato. So the Republicans were in favor of more power in the hands of Floriano Peixoto, just like Deodoro da Fonseca desired, right? However, we have the Federalists, right, which wanted power, to the states, more power to the states, as a genuine federalism really expects to see, right? So we had, as I said, the São Paulo oligarchy favoring Floriano Peixoto and establishing him as the president, as the new president. And in his turn, Floriano Peixoto, in view of this conflict in Rio Grande do Sul, he established Júlio Castilhos, one of his allies, as the governor. And that could not end well, as you can imagine, right? This is a picture of the conflict, right? You have the tents and all those people with their guns and horses, right? And this is a picture of Júlio Castilho, right? One of Floriano Peixoto's allies. And, this Federalist revolution was cruel, cold-blooded. Many people, many war prisoners were beheaded. So that was really, really cruel war. So even after the end of Floriano Peixoto's government in 1894, this conflict went on, right? And it was only at the Prudente de Moraes, the first civilian president of Brazil, mandate that really in the following year, 1895, this conflict could be ended after an agreement between the Federalist revolutionaries and President Prudente de Moraes, okay? Well, but we still have the problem, as we saw here, in 1895, in Prudente de Moraes' mandate, the Federalist revolution was resolved, but the Navy was still a problem. So, they demanded greater participation of sailors in the Brazilian Republic, and they were contrary to the concentration of power in the hands of the presidents of the Republic. So, the president really had to fight hard, against the Navy. The revolting sailors were initially defeated in Rio de Janeiro because, they attacked Rio de Janeiro with bombs. So then after being defeated in Rio de Janeiro, they migrated to the south. They joined forces with the Federalists, right? But, they were defeated, right, after a while. And in one of the circumstances there, they were, the Brazil Navy, the Navy that was in favor of Floriano de Peixoto was trying to capture Saldanha Gama, which was one of the leaders of the rebellious Navy, right? And Saldanha Gama received protection from the Portuguese in this case. So that caused Brazil to break off diplomatic relations with the Portuguese, and that was only reunited, that the diplomatic relations with the Portuguese were only reunited again during the Prudente de Moraes mandate. And again, you can see that Prudente de Moraes was really a reconciliation president, huh? Yeah. And also, to finish it off, guys, we have the economic crisis. Right. In the first years after the proclamation of the Republic, Deodoro da Fonseca really had a nation that was led by an archaic economic structure based on coffee, right? And it had a retrograde financial system. So, they put Minister Rui Barbosa. They actually. I was not going to say that. I was going to say that they challenged Rui Barbosa, the Minister of Finance, and the guy came up with a solution. Right? He established a monetary policy focused on the free issuance of monetary credits, something very similar to the reality that we know that took place in the United States, right? Where we had, until the 20s, until 1920s, we had, this atmosphere of positivism, of everybody was happy, so anyone could go to the stock market and invest. There was not really control. There weren't any rigid laws, regulating the way it worked. So the same thing happened here in Brazil. This monetary policy established by Rui Barbosa was really about, guys, feel free to issue credits, to issue money, to give money, to lend money. You can do whatever it takes, as long as our industry is developed. And that was called the saddling policy, right? The saddling policy is seen, as I said, as a reflection of the crisis that capitalism had faced since 1873, and that was only mitigated at the Campos Salles government. So it took many years, to sort out all the problems, from this saddling policy established by Rui Barbosa. Okay, well, this is it, guys. I hope you have enjoyed this class. In the next video, we will continue talking about the onset of the Republic in Brazil, right? So thank you so much, and see you in our next video.